Yuta and Kashimo, one being a prodigy born as a descendant of the great Michizane, the other a fighter so fierce his overwhelming strength led him to actual old age. But what would happen if these two were to come to blows? Well, in today's video, let's find out exactly that. What's up guys, Russ is Gambly here, and in today's video, we've got a crazy topic. These two characters were the only ones other than Gojo to damage Sukuna conventionally, and so it's to no one's surprise that they are at the forefront of people's minds. The god of lightning Hajime Kashimo versus the cursed child Yuta Okkotsu. Before we get into the video, YouTube tells me only 18% of the people who watch my content are subscribed.
Oh my god!
If you enjoy GTK videos like these, go ahead and subscribe. You'll get more videos and we'll both be happy. To start this video off, we definitely have to go into the cursed child, Yuta Okkotsu. Yuta is someone of immense strength, stated to be second to only Gojo. The implications of the statement are debated amongst the community, but in the end, all it does is upscale Yuta to the peaks of the verse. So let's start off with Yuta's strength. Yuta obviously goes through an immense training session during the time skip that we never got to see, but before it, Yuta was a force to be reckoned with. In his fight with Yuji during his mission to kill him, he manages to throw an entire car back at Yuji. This feat was something that shook Yuji to his core, and Yuta says that he's actually on the weaker side. Yuji makes an observation on the amount of cursed energy Yuta has and says that Yuta is the exact opposite of him. While Yuji already has insane physical stats without cursed energy, Yuta compensates for his lack of power with cursed energy. But Yuta's cursed energy pool is so large that it makes him stronger than most others. Yuta then goes on to confirm that he has more cursed energy than Gojo. The difference is, however, that he can run out of cursed energy while Gojo can't. After this piece of dialogue, Yuta goes on to box with Yuji and he manages to kick him. This kick throws Yuji off as it was insanely hard, and then he slashes Yuji. Yuji breaks Yuta's sword, however, but then something else appears. Rika. This entity is going to make this video a whole lot more crazy. While Yuta is strong himself, Rika is another variable in his power. But before we go into her scaling, let's continue talking about Yuta. As we all know, Yuta was massively holding back against Yuji here, but when we do see him try is in the Sendai colony against the cockroach, Uro, and Ryu. Against the cockroach, he utterly dominates him in physicality. With one attack, he sends him flying and slices off limbs easily. He ultimately exercises him with reverse curse technique, but we'll go into that later. In the 3v1 against Ryu and Uro, Yuta boxes with Ryu for a little bit, showing relativity and speed, but it's mainly Ryu who's doing the damage as both of them are talking about his attacks. He then summons Rika fully and jumps Uro while Uro can't defend herself, but she still goes on to box Yuta in the 1v1 right after. Mind you, Yuta had his gauntlets on, which could be argued to increase his attack power. This can be a testament to Uro's durability, but take that as you will. Yuta goes on to use the domain expansion, which we'll go into in a second, but after that domain fails, he enters a clash with Ryu. Ryu goes on to cancel out Yuta's beam, which may or may not be a weakened version of his full power. During this fight, however, Yuta acquired the ability to use sky manipulation and hits Ryu with Thin Icebreaker, doing damage to him. Ryu is someone known to have one of the best durabilities, as Sukuna states, so this feat is something to know. But all we've been discussing is stuff from pre-time skip. Now let's get into the insane things Yuta accomplishes post-training arc. Right off the bat, we see that Yuta can clash and box with a Sukuna who's trying to size him up, but then Yuta lets off his domain expansion. This is where everything went uphill for Yuta, because with it, he can use all of his curse techniques. The first thing he uses is Thin Icebreaker. Thin Icebreaker by nature is a Duraneg attack, and it broke through Sukuna's guard, dealing the first blow of damage to his Hainara body. Yuta then goes on to use Cleave, Sukuna's own curse technique, against him. The potency of Yuta's attack gets put into question considering the fact that despite Cleave being a durability negating technique, Sukuna easily tanks it. Still, this is an incredibly vital technique to have in his arsenal. In the chapter after Yuta lets off this Cleave, we see him fully go crazy, slicing Sukuna's arms, ripping out his second tongue, and then using one of his most lethal weapons yet, Jacob's ladder. I'll explain what exactly allowed Yuta to do this later on, but just know this is a deadly weapon to have in your arsenal. This Jacob's ladder fries Sukuna, or at least we thought, as Sukuna goes on to almost kill Yuta right after. Yuta also has a very contentious feat against Kenjaku as he's able to one-shot him. There's insane discourse throughout the community, some interpreting this scene as Kenjaku on guard, some thinking he's off guard, but nevertheless, this gives credence to Yuta's lethality with a sword. With that said, we aren't even done with the strength section yet, because we haven't even gotten into the second entity Yuta has, Rika. Rika appears in the current story as Yuta and Yuji fight, locking Yuji in place while merely being partially manifested. Emphasis on the partially manifested state is important because Rika reaches her full power when Yuta creates a connection between the two with his ring. The Rika we see in chapter 178 is her in all her glory, with an inventory full of cursed tools. We've never actually seen Rika herself use any of the cursed tools, so we won't attribute it to her own abilities, but the cursed tools she does have are a great benefit to Yuta himself. She's also able to block Ryu's blast with her bare hands, with Ryu himself stating that the feat was just as strong as Yuta's. Like I mentioned earlier, however, Ryu cancelled out the combined efforts of both Yuta and Rika's love beam, but then we find out that Rika herself can shoot a beam. This beam was shrugged off by Ryu, but as we've established before, Ryu is a durability monster. Rika even punches Ryu in the head and gets immediately one shot right after. After the time skip, Rika is able to push Sukuna around on multiple occasions and is even able to hold Sukuna in place while Yuta and Yuji pummel him. This leads us into speed. Pre-time skip, Yuta is able to go toe-in-toe with Ryu in hand-to-hand combat, but there's a feat before the Culling games that you probably forgot even existed. When Naoya meets Yuji and Choso, he ends up blissing them initially, but they eventually start trying to retaliate. Naoya, seeing this, says that they're tough, saying that he might up his speed. When Yuta arrives, shaking everyone by his presence, Naoya starts twerking for him, saying he'll go for Choso. Then all of a sudden a fight breaks out and Yuta is able to outpace Naoya's speed by getting to the same place at the same time as Naoya from a farther position. Of course, you can take it with a grain of salt, but literally in the next page, it's implied Yuta's speed isn't even at its max because he has a katana drawn. After the time skip, Yuta is able to go blow for blow with the Sukuna who's at the same cursed energy pool as him. Rika is a different case. We really don't get to see any crazy speed scaling for her. She just happens to be in the right place at the right time. When she moves, it's always off screen because she's basically a tool for Yuta. However, you could argue relativity to Yuta because once they both jump Uro, she's able to keep up with him in combat and not hinder him or leave him behind. A better stat to go into is durability and endurance. This is where things start to shine because post time skip, the thing that's been heavily emphasized is the fact that everyone's durability has increased tremendously. When Yuta arrives on the battlefield, he takes a couple of slashes to the face and completely brushes them off, healing them with ease. Then later on with Yuji, Yuta charges at Sukuna, but Sukuna retaliates with some slashes to which both of them survive and are able to start healing from. Sukuna then says that if he doesn't get direct contact with them, he wouldn't be able to give them a fatal wound just like it was with Ryu. For context, Sukuna at 15 fingers tried to one-shot Ryu but was surprised to see that he tanked the first slash. So he goes in for a direct touch and slices Ryu's head into 3. Sukuna says it's the same situation as it was with him right now, but he also says that they don't have better durability than him. Sukuna goes on to say that it's not even the fact that his cursed energy output is weakened, it's just that everyone's durability has increased drastically. Of course, Sukuna continues to drop in cursed energy output as Yuji continues to pile attacks on him. And it gets to the point where Yuta is able to brush off slashes to the face with direct contact. Yuta's tanking run comes to an end, however, when Sukuna manages to send off a world cutting slash at Yuta, cutting straight through him. Yuta doesn't completely die automatically, however, because he breaks his domain consciously and makes a signal. Rika, on the other hand, actually suffers more than Yuta. I can't really gauge if there's a great disparity between him and Rika, but right before Sukuna's statement about Yuta's durability, he touches Rika's hand and completely dissects it. Rika is able to completely brush this off, however, because of something we like to call hacks. Rika is a Shikigami of some sort, so she's able to completely heal herself without problem. But beyond that, she and Yuta have tons of incredible techniques. Something you probably didn't even know is that Yuta and Rika share vision. I don't know how the hell that works, but they do. This can be used as an upskill to one of Yuta's stolen curse techniques, G Battle Staff. With this technique, Yuta is able to look into the future of his opponent. The problem with the technique, however, was that the person had to be in their line of sight. With this ridiculous power Yuta has, he can quite literally see his blind spot, so he can never be taken off guard like Hakari did against Charles. This can be a good way to get an easy dodge and hit, as he does against Sukuna here. Yuta also has sky manipulation, and it allows him to fly, warp punches, and use a durability negating technique called Thin Icebreaker. Another technique Yuta has is Jacob's Ladder, that is described to be the complete eradication of a target's curse technique. Yuta has curse speech that allows him to tell weaker curses to die, and also allows him to keep Sukuna in place to hit him with another attack. He also has Drew's technique that never really actually damages anyone. And finally, Sukuna has Sukuna's curse technique, Cleave and Dismantle. But wait, I'm not even done yet, and that's the crazy part. If Yuta has no connection with Rika, Yuta isn't able to use these curse techniques, but once he has a connection with Rika, he has 5 minutes to utilize 3 perks. 1. The use of his curse techniques. 2. The use of a fully manifested Rika. And 3. Rika's curse energy at his disposal. The last one is super important because that means during these 5 minutes, Yuta has access to what it seems to be infinite curse energy. Yuta also has reverse curse techniques so potent that he can heal limbs. Yuta has tons of curse tools at his disposal to use from Rika's arsenal, and I haven't even gotten to his most broken ability, his domain expansion. On top of Yuta's proficiency in barrier techniques, Yuta can do something that only his curse technique would allow him to do. Yuta is a man with multiple curse techniques, so with that, he can take one of those curse techniques and make it the sure hit of the domain. Then the katanas all around him inhabit a new curse technique by itself. In the Sukuna fight, he opted to have Jacob's Ladder as the sure hit, and he was actually able to make it maximum output. Then he had infinite swords at his disposal, all helping him to put the beats on Sukuna. Yuta also has beams he can shoot with Rika, which we went over earlier. But with all that said, Yuta is a heavily versatile character. So now let's get into the God of Lightning, Hajime Kashimo. Kashimo dominated the Culling games, boasting the most points out of anyone and holding second place even after using 100 of them to add a rule to the game. As soon as we see him in combat for the first time, multiple things are noted. He's fast, but at the same time his attacks are heavy. We can only scale Kashimo based on 3 fights, all of which give more to his scaling. So with that in mind, let's enter his strength. In his fight with Panda, each attack literally dismembers him. He can also stun you with each punch, but that's kind of a non-factor, as I'll go over in a second. When Hakari comes into the fight, it's very unquantifiable how much damage his actual punches are doing to him. This is because, of course, Hakari heals up from everything thrown at him. When Hakari's in base though, Hakari gets killed or at the very least knocked out multiple times within his own domain. The attack that really carries Kashimo's AP, however, is his lightning. The explanation for this is very dragged by Gege, so I'll explain it much simpler. Basically, the way regular lightning is formed is through the movement of negative. In layman's terms, he sends a lightning bolt at you after he makes you a target for it by hitting you a lot of times, and you can never dodge it. He uses his attack 4 times in the story. He one-shots Panda in his strongest form with it. He blows up Hakari's arm with it. He also blows up Hakari's torso by sending the charges to his staff. And finally, he tries to use it on Sukuna, but Sukuna transformed in the middle of it, taking no damage as a result. When Kashimo uses his curse technique, his stats skyrocket, with his main attacks being a blast he shoots from his mouth or other limbs. Just like in base, the punches don't have quantifiable damage because he decks Sukuna in the face, but we don't see a result of it. He just automatically transforms into his true form. He also hits Sukuna with a grand total of 1 blast, and it was blocked by Sukuna. On top of that, we don't see any visible damage to him either. But the stat I think Kashimo excels at is speed. Kashimo in this fight with Hakari is able to keep up with him in hand-to-hand combat while Hakari is suppressed. Of course, when Hakari decides to speed up, he starts blissing Kashimo, but before, Kashimo is able to casually go blow for blow with him. He also dominates base Akari, getting more hits in rather than getting hit. Apart from the fact that Kashimo's speed is specifically stated to be increased as well as beyond the limits of mankind, we see Kashimo punch Sukuna in the face immediately after reacting to the hit with a staff. After this, Kashimo gets embarrassed by true form Sukuna, but this performance is something that would happen to literally anyone in the verse other than Gojo. This is Sukuna we're talking about. In regards to durability and endurance, we really don't have much to go off of here. When he fights Sukuna, he tanks his first barrage of physical attacks, but then he gets immediately cut by the world-cutting slash. Sukuna then blitzes and pummels Kashimo, making him bleed, then finishes him off by making him a waffle. This isn't an anti-feat because, again, everyone in the verse other than Gojo Satoru is dying to that. Finally, we enter hacks. Kashimo is a lightning guy, so his hacks consist of different lightning abilities. The first thing we find out is that Kashimo stuns people with his lightning curse energy trait in hand-to-hand combat. This is a form of durability negation that allows him to get the upper hand in battle. Then after, Kashimo is able to send lightning bolts at you after a couple of hits. He does it against Sukuna after 2 punches and 1 blast, but against Akari, he has to let off a multitude of attacks before he could let it off. So it's safe to assume that when Kashimo enters his curse technique, the requirements lower down. In his curse technique, by the way, Kashimo can shoot blasts at you and it increases his speed many times over. With everything set in stone and both characters analyzed, who would win in a fight? Let's find out. The perfect scenario for this fight would be when Kashimo tries to press Yuta in chapter 234. Let's imagine Yuta actually tries to go to Gojo and Kashimo meets him outside to stop him. From there, they will start. Same rules as always, whoever dies or gets knocked out first, loses. So let's go and simulate the fight. Play the Budokai music. The fight would start and Yuta and Kashimo would enter hand-to-hand combat. Kashimo's stunning attacks will be ignored because Yuta's curse energy pool is the second highest in the entire verse. Behind Kashimo appears a half-manifested Rika, and so Kashimo starts to get pressed. So he unleashes his curse technique. Now, this is where everything goes up to interpretation. In his Amber form, Kashimo would blitz Yuta multiple times over. I don't think anyone disagrees with this. So if Kashimo starts pressing Yuta before Yuta can get his domain off, there is a chance that Kashimo can win. This is because he'd be able to land heavy blows while avoiding some. He can also send lightning in that form with what seems to be less requirements, so a fast beating with a lightning bolt would definitely kill Yuta. However, it won't be that easy because of Yuta's endurance in RCT. For this reason, there can be a possibility for Yuta to get his ring on and open his domain expansion, and that's where everything takes a turn. In Yuta's domain, Sukuna had to use Hollow Wicker Basket to combat the sure hit effect of Jacob's Ladder. Kashimo is stated to have this ability, but that means Kashimo remains in this domain with his arms completely occupied. This isn't a good situation for Kashimo because he'd be left to fight with his blast that a nearly dying Sukuna was able to block and come out unscathed from. There's also implications that you need your mouth for Hollow Wicker Basket, and so if that's the case, Kashimo would have to fight with his feet. Yuta also has Charles' curse technique to see when a blast is coming to dodge accordingly. Then Icebreaker breaks Kashimo's guard, and he also has Cleave. This by itself would just be a slaughter from there on out. Yuta, and if he really wants it, a fully manifested Rika would bully Kashimo to death within the domain. If Kashimo lets go of Hollow Wicker Basket to use his hands against Yuta, he will in fact get caught by Rika, who's able to hold Sukuna in place while partially manifested. All of that would lead to Kashimo getting hit with Jacob's Ladder. The damage it does doesn't matter here because the main thing is that his curse technique will turn off. In chapter 237, it's explained that because Kashimo's curse technique makes him surpass the limits of mankind, the moment Kashimo's technique runs out, his body will crumble. Having his curse technique turned off in the middle of it would just make the process faster, and Kashimo would literally die on the spot. So all in all, if Kashimo can f up Yuta outside of his domain, he can win with a combo and a couple of lightning bolts. But if there is an ever so slight chance that Yuta opens his domain, Kashimo has 0 win cons and he just dies on the spot. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Do make sure to subscribe. I mean, you got this far anyways. And I'll catch y'all in the next one.